Nia had always been admired in her village, not just for her striking beauty but for the quiet wisdom that resided in her soul. Her dark, luminous eyes held the depth of ancient rivers, and her voice, gentle yet firm, carried the weight of truth. From a young age she had been different, not just another daughter to be married off, but a woman with a spirit too wild for cages. She loved to sit beneath the great baobab tree, listening to the wind whisper through its leaves, feeling as though the gods themselves were speaking to her. But in her kingdom, beauty and wisdom were not shields against fate. Here, marriage was not a union of hearts but a transaction of power. Fathers did not seek suitors for their daughters based on love, but on wealth, land and influence. And so, when Nia's father, a respected but ambitious merchant, was approached by Chief Alyamide, a man old enough to be her grandfather, feared for his cruelty and hunger for control, he did not hesitate. In exchange for gold, land and the chief's protection, he sealed his daughter's fate with a mere nod. Nia's world crumbled in an instant. She had always known that her marriage would be arranged, but she had hoped, prayed, that the gods would be merciful. That she would be given to someone kind, someone she could at least learn to care for. But Chief Alyamide was known throughout the land for his ruthlessness. His previous wives had lived in the shadows, their voices never heard, their pain hidden behind palace walls. Some had vanished without a trace, their names whispered in fear. The night Nia was told of her impending marriage, she stood before her mother, her voice shaking but firm. "You cannot let this happen," she pleaded. "The gods do not smile upon forced unions." Her mother, eyes weary from years of silence, only placed a trembling hand on her daughter's cheek. "What can gods do against the will of men?" she whispered. "We are but leaves in the wind, Nia." But Nia was not convinced. She remembered the stories the village elders told, the prophecy passed down for generations. It was said that long ago, a woman much like her had been forced into a loveless marriage. The gods had taken pity on her suffering and had intervened, unleashing a storm that swept through the kingdom, destroying everything built upon forced love and broken promises. The tale had become a warning, though many dismissed it as legend. But Nia believed in the power of the gods. And so, as the days crept toward her wedding, she made a silent vow beneath the baobab tree. If the gods had truly intervened once before, they would do so again. She would not be a pawn in a cruel man's game. She would find a way to defy fate. The day of the wedding arrived, draped in a silence heavier than the humid air. The village bustled with activity, but there was no joy, only duty. Servants rushed to and fro, carrying bolts of expensive fabric, jars of fragrant oils, and baskets of rare spices to prepare the grandest feast the kingdom had seen in years. Musicians tuned their instruments, though their melodies would soon fall flat against the thick curtain of unease that blanketed the land. The people had seen many weddings before, but never one that felt more like a funeral. Inside the chief's palace, Nia sat motionless as the attendants worked on her, their hands soft but mechanical. They wove golden chains into her long ebony hair, threading them like shackles rather than ornaments. They painted her lips the color of crushed berries, lined her eyes with the darkest kohl, and dressed her in robes too heavy for comfort. Each layer of silk felt like another layer of imprisonment, weighing her down, drowning her. Her reflection in the polished bronze mirror was unfamiliar. She was meant to look like a queen, but all she saw was a prisoner. Her heart pounded like a drum of war, though there was no battle to fight, only surrender. Outside, the villagers watched the wedding preparations with quiet grief. They loved Nia not only for her beauty but for her kindness. She had spent her youth tending to the sick, playing with the children, and listening to the stories of the elders. She belonged to them, to the land, to the river that sang at night, not to the chief who ruled with an iron fist. But what could they do? To defy the chief was to invite ruin. And so they watched, helpless, as their brightest flower was plucked and placed in a gilded cage. The time came. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a deep crimson glow over the village. By the time the wedding procession began, darkness had swallowed the sky, leaving only the blood-red moon hanging low like an omen. The elders exchanged uneasy glances. A moon of that color was rare and never boded well. Some whispered that the gods were watching, displeased. Others said it was the spirits of the forgotten wives, their anger bleeding into the heavens. The ceremony was grand, extravagant beyond measure. Drums pounded, voices chanted, and torches burned high, but there was no warmth in the air, only a suffocating stillness beneath the forced revelry. Nia's father stood beside the chief, smiling as if he had won a great victory. The chief himself grinned, though the expression never reached his cold, predatory eyes. As Nia stepped forward, her breath hitched. The night air was thick, humming with something unseen. The blood-red moon loomed above, its glow pressing down upon her skin. It felt as if the sky itself was warning her, whispering that this was not meant to be. The wedding feast was in full swing, though the air remained heavy with an unshakable tension. Lavish platters of roasted meat and exotic fruits adorned the long tables, golden goblets overflowed with palm wine, and dancers moved to the rhythm of the pounding drums. Yet, beneath the forced merriment, unease clung to the air like mist over a cursed river. The villagers ate, drank, and smiled, but their eyes flickered toward the blood-red moon, their hearts whispering silent prayers. Then, as if carried by the wind itself, a figure emerged from the shadows. He was unlike any man the villagers had seen before, tall, draped in a flowing cloak the color of storm clouds, with a presence that seemed both earthly and otherworldly. His dark skin gleamed under the moonlight, and his eyes, sharp as a falcon's, carried an ancient knowing. Some believed he was a traveler, a wandering griot who carried forgotten tales. Others swore he was a warrior, a lone nomad who had survived many battles. But the oldest among them, those who still remembered the whispers of the gods, suspected something far greater. He stepped forward, his voice deep and steady, cutting through the drumming like a blade. "This union is cursed," he declared. The crowd stilled. The laughter died. Even the wind seemed to hush in anticipation. The chief, seated on his grand throne, let out a booming laugh, the sound thick with arrogance. "And who are you," he sneered, "to speak of curses at my wedding?" The stranger did not flinch. He did not bow or offer the chief the reverence expected of a man in his presence. Instead he locked eyes with Nia. In that moment she felt something shift within her, as if an unseen thread had been pulled tight between them. His gaze was familiar, though she had never seen him before. It was as if she had known him in another life, in another world, long before this moment. The stranger continued, his voice unwavering. "The gods do not bless what is taken by force. Love cannot be shackled like an ox, nor traded like gold. The blood moon is a warning. If this marriage continues, ruin will follow." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The elders exchanged worried glances. The villagers gripped their goblets tighter. The young mothers pulled their children closer. But the chief merely chuckled, shaking his head. "I have ruled for many years and I do not fear stories told in the dark," he said. "The gods have never dared to stand in my way before. Why should they now?" The stranger did not answer. Instead he turned to Nia once more, his voice softer now, just for her. "You do not belong in chains," he whispered. "The storm is coming. Be ready." And just as suddenly as he had arrived, he stepped back into the shadows. Nia's heart pounded. Something was coming. And for the first time that night she felt a flicker of hope. The wedding feast had ended, but the weight on Nia's heart only grew heavier. She had been led through the grand halls of the chief's palace, her wrists adorned with golden bangles that felt more like shackles. The moment she crossed the threshold of the chief's private chambers, the heavy wooden doors slammed shut behind her, sealing her fate. The room was vast but suffocating. Intricately woven tapestries hung from the walls, depicting the chief's many conquests, battles won, lands seized, and wives claimed. At the center stood a grand bed, draped in silk, but it looked no softer than a grave. Nia's hands trembled as she stepped forward. Her breathing was shallow, her pulse a frantic rhythm against her skin. Then the first crack of thunder split the sky. The wind howled through the narrow windows, carrying the scent of rain and something older, something powerful. The torches along the walls flickered violently, their flames shrinking as if in fear. A second bolt of lightning streaked across the heavens, illuminating the room for a brief moment before plunging it into darkness once more. Nia's chest tightened. The gods were watching. Beyond the door, she could hear the heavy footsteps of Chief Alyamide as he approached. The scent of wine and arrogance clung to him, thick as the storm outside. He laughed, a low and guttural sound as he pushed open the door. "You look afraid, little dove," he mused, stepping inside. "Do you tremble because you know you are mine now?" A third bolt of lightning struck, this time closer, so close that the very walls of the palace seemed to shake. A gust of wind rushed through the chamber, dousing every torch in an instant. The room was plunged into shadows. Then a voice, not of man but of something far greater, echoed through the storm. "A heart forced cannot belong." The words did not come from outside. They did not come from within. They came from everywhere and nowhere, weaving into the very fabric of the air. The chief froze. The air grew heavy, pressing against Nia's skin like unseen hands. Then the final strike. Lightning tore through the sky and found its mark. A blinding flash exploded through the chamber as a bolt crashed through the palace roof, shattering stone and setting tapestries ablaze. The ground trembled beneath them. The chief let out a strangled cry, clutching his chest as his body convulsed. His strength, his power, was draining from him like water through open hands. Nia stumbled back, watching in horror. The once mighty chief, feared by all, now lay gasping on the ground. His hands clawed at the floor, his face twisted in agony. His skin, once rich with color, paled to an unnatural gray. The gods had spoken. The curse had begun. The storm raged on as Nia ran, her bare feet slapping against the wet earth. She did not look back. The palace behind her was in chaos. The chief's agonized cries, the panicked shouts of his guards, the roar of thunder overhead. But none of it mattered. The gods had given her a sign and she would not waste it. The jungle loomed before her, vast and unknowable. Towering trees swayed violently under the winds, their gnarled branches stretching like twisted fingers. Darkness pooled between the trunks, thick and impenetrable. The villagers had always warned of the dangers that lurked in its depths. Beasts with glowing eyes, spirits that whispered men's names in the night. But to Nia, the jungle was not as terrifying as the fate she had left behind. She plunged into the undergrowth. The branches clawed at her skin, the roots threatened to trip her, but she pressed on, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Rain soaked through her wedding robes, turning them heavy, clinging to her like the chains she had escaped. The sound of drums and shouting faded behind her, swallowed by the jungle's eternal silence. Then came the first trial. The growl was low, nearly lost in the howling wind, but Nia felt it in her bones. Her heart lurched as she turned to see two glowing eyes staring at her through the darkness. A leopard, its sleek body coiled, ready to strike. She had no weapon, no strength left to fight. She could only stare, frozen, as the great beast stalked forward. Then whispers. They came from nowhere, yet everywhere at once. Soft as the rustling of leaves, familiar as a lullaby sung long ago. The voices of ancestors, the echoes of the gods. Keep moving, child. Fear does not serve you here. The leopard did not pounce. It blinked once, then slowly turned, melting into the darkness as if called away by unseen forces. Nia stumbled forward, hunger gnawing at her, exhaustion wrapping around her limbs like vines. The jungle was endless, its winding paths unkind to the lost. Her body ached, her vision blurred. The whispers did not stop, urging her onward. Just a little farther. You are not meant to die here. Then she saw it, the river. Wide and gleaming under the storm's fractured light, its surface was calm despite the raging sky. It seemed untouched by the world's cruelty, sacred, eternal. The moment her feet touched the water's edge, her legs gave out. She collapsed. The last thing she saw before the darkness took her was a figure emerging from the trees, tall, cloaked in woven cloth, their face painted with the symbols of the old ways. More figures followed, their eyes filled with recognition, as if they had been waiting for her. Then everything went still. Nia awoke to the scent of burning herbs and the gentle murmur of voices speaking in a language older than the rivers. She was lying on a woven mat, her body wrapped in soft animal furs. The warmth of a fire flickered nearby, casting shadows along the curved walls of the hut. She blinked, her vision still hazy. Where am I? A woman knelt beside her, her dark skin painted with sacred white markings. Her eyes, deep and knowing, studied Nia with quiet reverence. You have come just as it was foretold, the woman murmured. Nia tried to sit up, but her limbs felt like stone. The woman placed a hand on her shoulder, firm but gentle. Rest, child. You are safe among the keepers of the old ways. The words settled over Nia like a balm. She had heard of this tribe in whispered legends, guardians of forgotten wisdom, protectors of the balance between the mortal world and the gods. They lived deep within the jungle, unseen by those who did not seek them. And yet she had found them, or perhaps they had been waiting for her all along. Days passed and her strength returned. The tribe fed her, clothed her in garments woven from the fibers of the land, and painted her skin with symbols of protection. But even as her body healed, a greater truth loomed over her. She had not escaped the chief's clutches by chance. The gods had spared her, guided her to this place. And now they demanded something in return. The elders gathered before her one evening, the firelight dancing in their wise eyes. The chief of the tribe, an aged man with silver-streaked braids, spoke. You were brought here for a reason, child, he said. The prophecy spoke of a woman who would defy the chains of man and awaken the gods. But to fulfill your destiny you must prove yourself. Nia's hands clenched into fists. How? The trials of the spirits. 3 trials, each a test of her mind, body and soul. The first was the trial of endurance. She was taken deep into the jungle and left alone. She had to survive for 3 days, with only her instincts and the whispers of the spirits to guide her. The jungle tested her with hunger, storms, and shadows that moved in the night. But she endured. She listened to the earth, to the voices that had saved her before. The second was the trial of courage. She was led to a sacred cave where an ancient beast, a serpent as old as time, coiled in darkness. She had to retrieve a stone from its den without succumbing to fear. With steady hands and a heart that refused to break, she faced the creature and emerged victorious. The final trial was the trial of spirit. She was made to stand before the sacred fire and open her soul to the gods. They showed her visions of her past, her future, her true purpose. And when she emerged, her heart no longer wavered. She was no longer just Nia. She was the chosen one. The night was eerily quiet when the first warning came. A lone bird, its feathers black as the void, let out a shrill cry before vanishing into the treetops. The elders of the keepers of the old ways exchanged knowing glances, their bodies stiffening. They had seen the signs. The chief was coming. By the time the moon reached its peak, the jungle trembled with the approach of warriors. Their torches burned like angry stars against the darkness, their spears gleaming under the cursed light of the sky. At the front of the procession was Chief Alyamide himself, no longer the proud, towering figure he had once been, but a husk of the man he had been on his wedding night. His skin was sallow, his eyes sunken into deep hollows. The curse had drained him, his once mighty body now frail and racked with pain. Every step he took was labored, yet his desperation burned hotter than ever. "She is mine," he rasped, his voice a shadow of its former strength. "The gods have punished me, but I know the way to break it. Return the girl to me and I will be restored." The keepers stood firm, their warriors forming a protective circle around Nia. The chief's men, though fierce, hesitated. The jungle was alive tonight, the wind whispering warnings, the very ground humming with unseen power. The chief took a shaking step forward. "Do you think you can defy me?" he spat, his voice laced with venom. "I am the ruler of the greatest kingdom. My word is law. You are nothing but cowards hiding behind old myths." An elder of the keepers stepped forward. His gaze was calm, but his voice carried the weight of the ages. "You are already dead, Alyamide," he said softly. "It is only your body that has yet to accept it." The chief roared in fury. "If you will not surrender her, then I will take her by force." With a wave of his hand, his warriors surged forward, their spears raised. But the keepers did not falter. They had been trained not just in battle but in the ways of the gods. As the first of the chief's men charged, the warriors of the keepers moved like shadows, their movements fluid, guided by something beyond mortal skill. The jungle itself fought alongside them. The roots beneath the warriors' feet shifted, sending them tumbling. The wind howled, blinding them with dust. The flames of their torches flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. At the center of the chaos, Nia stood frozen. This battle was because of her. This war, this bloodshed, it was all leading to something greater. And then she knew. This was no longer about escape. It was about destiny. She stepped forward, raising her hands. A hush fell over the battlefield. Even the chief's men hesitated, watching her with awe and fear. The gods had chosen her. And she would not run anymore. The battle had ended, but the storm within Nia's soul had just begun. As the chief's warriors lay defeated, the jungle fell silent once more. The keepers gathered around her, their expressions unreadable. Then, without a word, the elders motioned for her to follow. They led her away from the battlefield, past the sacred river, and into the heart of the jungle. There, hidden beneath the roots of an ancient tree, was the entrance to a cave, dark and yawning like the mouth of the earth itself. The air around it crackled with unseen energy, thick with the presence of something greater than mortal understanding. "The gods are waiting," an elder murmured. Nia swallowed hard. This was her final trial. She stepped inside. The cave was vast and endless, the walls lined with glowing veins of gold and silver. Shadows danced along the stone, forming shifting shapes, faces that were both familiar and unknown. The air was neither warm nor cold but heavy with power, pressing down on her like the weight of eternity. Then they appeared. The gods did not take human form. They were light and darkness, thunder and silence, creation and destruction all at once. Their voices were not heard but felt, vibrating through the marrow of her bones. You have defied your fate, they spoke as one. You have chosen courage over fear. But now the greatest test remains. Before her, the image of Chief Alyamide materialized, no longer the ruthless ruler, no longer the terrifying force he once was. He was weak, kneeling, his body thin and broken, his eyes hollow with suffering. He wronged you, the gods intoned. He sought to claim you, to chain you, to force what was never his to take. The curse upon him was just. The chief groaned, barely able to lift his head. Please? His voice was a whisper of what it had once been. Spare me? Nia felt the weight of the god's gaze upon her. You hold his fate in your hands. Choose, let him perish and your vengeance will be fulfilled. Or grant him mercy, and reveal the truest strength of your heart. She stared at the broken man before her. He had caused her suffering, stolen her freedom, and brought war to the people who had sheltered her. Every part of her had the right to let him wither away into nothingness. And yet, I will not carry the burden of hatred, she whispered. Let him live. The cave shuddered, and for a moment there was silence. Then a warmth unlike anything she had ever felt surrounded her, seeping into her very soul. You have chosen well. The curse was lifted, but the gods did not return Alyamide's power. He would live but as a man stripped of his title, his wealth, his rule. His punishment would not be death, but the knowledge of what he had lost. The god's presence faded, the cave's glow dimming. Nia turned and walked out, stepping into the light of dawn. The battle had ended, but the storm within Nia's soul had just begun. As the chief's warriors lay defeated, the jungle fell silent once more. The keepers gathered around her, their expressions unreadable. Then, without a word, the elders motioned for her to follow. They led her away from the battlefield, past the sacred river, and into the heart of the jungle. There, hidden beneath the roots of an ancient tree, was the entrance to a cave, dark and yawning like the mouth of the earth itself. The air around it crackled with unseen energy, thick with the presence of something greater than mortal understanding. The gods are waiting, an elder murmured. Nia swallowed hard. This was her final trial. She stepped inside. The cave was vast and endless, the walls lined with glowing veins of gold and silver. Shadows danced along the stone, forming shifting shapes, faces that were both familiar and unknown. The air was neither warm nor cold but heavy with power, pressing down on her like the weight of eternity. Then they appeared. The gods did not take human form. They were light and darkness, thunder and silence, creation and destruction all at once. Their voices were not heard but felt, vibrating through the marrow of her bones. You have defied your fate, they spoke as one. You have chosen courage over fear. But now the greatest test remains. Before her, the image of Chief Alyamide materialized, no longer the ruthless ruler, no longer the terrifying force he once was. He was weak, kneeling, his body thin and broken, his eyes hollow with suffering. He wronged you, the gods intoned. He sought to claim you, to chain you, to force what was never his to take. The curse upon him was just. The chief groaned, barely able to lift his head. Please? His voice was a whisper of what it had once been. Spare me? Nia felt the weight of the god's gaze upon her. You hold his fate in your hands. Choose, let him perish and your vengeance will be fulfilled. Or grant him mercy, and reveal the truest strength of your heart. She stared at the broken man before her. He had caused her suffering, stolen her freedom, and brought war to the people who had sheltered her. Every part of her had the right to let him wither away into nothingness. And yet, I will not carry the burden of hatred, she whispered. Let him live. The cave shuddered, and for a moment there was silence. Then a warmth unlike anything she had ever felt surrounded her, seeping into her very soul. You have chosen well. The curse was lifted, but the gods did not return Alyamide's power. He would live but as a man stripped of his title, his wealth, his rule. His punishment would not be death, but the knowledge of what he had lost. The god's presence faded, the cave's glow dimming. Nia turned and walked out, stepping into the light of dawn. She had passed the final trial. She was free. The kingdom trembled in the wake of Chief Alyamide's fall. Without its ruler, chaos threatened to consume the land. His advisors, once arrogant and powerful, bickered among themselves, each seeking to seize control. The warriors who had once enforced his cruel rule were left without orders, uncertain of their place. The people, farmers, merchants, healers and artisans, watched in fearful silence, uncertain of what was to come. Then from the heart of the jungle she returned. Nia stepped into the village, no longer the frightened girl forced into a loveless marriage, but a woman touched by the gods. Her presence sent ripples through the crowd. The whispers spread like wildfire. She survived. She was chosen. She defeated the curse. The keepers of the old ways walked beside her, their sacred garments a testament to the wisdom they carried. The villagers fell to their knees, not out of fear but in reverence. They had always loved Nia. They had mourned when she was given away. And now she stood before them, not as a victim of fate but as its master. A gathering was called in the great courtyard where Alyamide had once ruled. The elders of the land, the warriors, the merchants, and even the poorest farmers came together to witness what would happen next. One of the elders, his beard white with age, raised his voice. "The throne is empty. The kingdom is lost. But the gods have shown us the way." His gaze landed on Nia. "Will you lead us?" A hush fell. Nia took a deep breath. She had never sought power. She had never dreamed of ruling. But she had seen the cruelty of forced rule, the way greed and fear could break a people. She knew what it was to suffer. And she knew what it was to rise above that suffering. She stepped forward. "I will not rule as a chief of conquest," she said. "I will not take power as a right but as a duty. The gods did not spare me to become what I once feared." Her voice grew stronger. "This kingdom will not be built on war but on wisdom. No man, woman, or child will be forced into a fate they do not choose. No family will suffer under the weight of greed. The law will not serve the powerful alone, it will serve all." A murmur of agreement swept through the crowd, rising into cheers. Under Nia's rule, the kingdom transformed. The old ways of oppression were broken. The keepers were welcomed into the courts, ensuring that the wisdom of the gods guided the land. Marriages were no longer tools of power but bonds of love. The people flourished, not through conquest but through unity. And so, the prophecy was fulfilled. Not through war. Not through vengeance. But through the heart of a woman who refused to be caged. The true queen had risen. Years passed and Nia's name became more than that of a ruler, it became a legend. Under her guidance, the kingdom flourished. The land bore rich harvests, the people thrived in harmony, and justice was no longer a tool of the powerful but a shield for all. Songs were sung of the woman who had defied fate, who had turned suffering into strength and chaos into order. But even as she ruled, a question remained in the whispers of the people. Did she ever find love? Some believed that the mysterious stranger from her wedding night had returned to her, that he had been a god in disguise, testing her heart. They told stories of how he appeared in the night, watching from the shadows until the moment was right to step forward, offering not chains but an equal hand to hold. Others swore that Nia had never wed, that she had found love within herself, that after being forced into a loveless marriage she refused to give her heart to anything but her own spirit. They said she walked among her people not as a queen searching for love, but as one who had become whole in her own right. And then there were those who believed that love had always been in her destiny, that the gods had shaped her path so that she would not just survive, but find something greater. A love that was not forced, not bargained, not a tool of power, but a choice freely made. Whichever version was true, one thing was certain. The gods had never acted out of cruelty. Their wrath had not been punishment but balance. They had not sought to destroy but to restore. Nia had been their instrument, but more than that, she had been their lesson to the world. For generations, mothers would tell their daughters her tale. Fathers would warn their sons. Chiefs and kings would listen to the whispers of the past before sealing the fates of others. Do not force a heart that does not belong to you. Do not build a throne upon chains. For the gods are watching and they do not forget. Nia's reign came to an end not in war, nor in tragedy but in peace. When she finally left the world of the living, the skies did not thunder and rage, nor did the earth tremble with grief. Instead, a warm wind carried her name through the valleys and hills, and the people swore they heard a whisper in the trees, a voice laughing softly, free at last. And so the legend remained. A story of a woman who had once been caged but had risen. A queen whose rule was not written in blood, but in wisdom. A reminder that love, above all else, must never be forced, for even the gods would not allow it.